Hi.
And Geshe, I just stopped the recording. It's in
Sure.
process. So
All
1
right.
minute.
Okay.
Record to the cloud. Okay. And Geshe, you are now co-host. Did you
Okay. Thank you.
see my two?
Yes, I did. But we've got some questions left for today. So let's do it next time.
Okay.
Let's answer them next time.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
Oh,
Thank you so much
there's some more.
for being with us.
Oh, okay.
So
I just got the message. All
oh,
right. Anyway, let's continue. Okay, great. Okay, so let's start with the meditation. First, some breathing meditation. And visualize in the space in front of you your Lama or your lamas arising in the form of Buddha Shakyamuni. Who appears in the form of a fully ordained monk. And around the Buddha, around us, are all sentient beings, helping us to remember why we're here. Reminding us that we can become just like the Buddha. We have Buddha nature, or the potential to overcome all our obstructions. Independence on all sentient beings. So just as we need the Buddha to guide us, to teach us, we need all sentient beings to reach Buddhahood. And so based on the understanding of the importance of sentient beings, let's generate affectionate love, feeling close and deeply concerned for the well-being of sentient beings. Focusing on the lovable aspects each sentient being has. And without letting go of our affection, our fondness for sentient beings, let's focus on their sufferings, their dissatisfactory experiences. And from the depth of our heart, wish for them to be free from all these experiences and their causes. And also wish to be able to help them, assist them in their overcoming all dissatisfactory experiences and their causes. And that great compassion then gives way to the altruistic attitude that is now determined to do whatever we can to help sentient beings overcome their suffering and its causes. In the form of the altruistic attitude, being determined, taking personal responsibility for the welfare of sentient beings. Which of course only really makes sense if we become enlightened ourselves. If we attain this state of a Buddha, in order to then be most effective in guiding sentient beings to that same state. So let's generate that sincere aspiration to become a fully enlightened Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. Which is also our motivation for continuing to study the Precious Garland. Let's first recite the prayer. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. All right, great. So let's start with death. Okay. go. And the lamrim. Where's the lamrim? Oh yeah, here we go. So as part of the lamrim meditation on death, last time we briefly discussed the disadvantages of not remembering death. Well, today we quickly go through the 6 benefits of remembering death as part of our practice of going through the lamrim, if, of course, ideally doing every day a little bit at home. So to just reflect on these 6 facts. Well, first of all, that if we really remember death, we'll act meaningfully and we'll want to practice the Dharma. Which, well, I guess it makes sense to all of us. If we have the thought, I may die tomorrow or even today, then so many things we usually worry about, our reputation, well, the eight worldly concerns, basically. So we won't worry about material possessions because we have to leave them behind. Pleasure, I mean, well, maybe the immediate pleasure, not being in great pain, but having a pleasant car, a pleasant, I don't know, pleasant clothes, pleasant accommodation, whatever, pleasant home, it's no longer important. Reputation, I mean, who cares? I've got to leave this mind and body behind. So, well, reputation is no longer an issue. And even being praised or not praised, again, who cares if in a few hours possibly I'm gone? And well, whoever's going to be praised, that person no longer exists in that way. It's interesting because some people have this deep urge, like a lot of politicians, to leave a legacy. That is so interesting. It's almost like the only thing that's left of you is your legacy. And so what? From a Buddhist point of view, of course, you'll be reborn. You don't even know you were that person. So that this legacy was yours or is yours, you're not even aware of. But in general, I guess most people, when we think about death, those things, those concerns, possessions, pleasure, and so forth, gain, where's gain? Pleasure, receiving material possessions. Yes, so gain is no longer important. And then we've got the space, we've got the mental space to really practice the Dharma. And our positive actions will be powerful and effective. Right now, we do engage in positive actions, but in the back of our mind, there is, well, will I get something back? Will I have a good reputation? Will I be praised? Maybe receive some material objects? The pleasure of being praised, or the pleasure of whatever pleasure I derive from that, like just based on self-cherishing. So all that falls away. So all our positive actions will be very powerful. All that messy stuff, all the other disruptive thoughts that lessen the impact of our positive actions, well, they'll be gone. And of course, it's important at the beginning to make us practice. Right now, we may just procrastinate. Oh, I'll start tomorrow. I'll start next week. But if we know we're going to die, or if we take into consideration that we could die anytime, of course, we don't know. We could also survive. But taking into consideration our own death, well, it gets us to practice. So in the beginning, it gives us that drive to actually, well, make the greatest effort to transform our mind. And it's important in the middle, because just making that initial effort is not enough. We need to keep going. We need to continue, persevere, because obstacles are going to arise. That's just part of Dharma practice, part of the purification process. Overcoming obstacles. Again, thinking of death, remembering death, helps us to persevere, to continue on. And it's important at the end, even when we get close to the results, well, it keeps us focused on what we want to achieve without getting sidetracked. So in that way, C, D, and E, so these three, the last three I just talked about, being so important in terms of our practice at this point. Or no, practice not just at this point, but now in the future and towards the end. And we'll die with a happy mind. Best preparation for a next life. Yeah, so these sticks, of course. And when we say the first one, we'll act meaningfully and we'll want to practice the Dharma, well, we act meaningfully in that we prepare in a meaningful way for a future life. That doesn't mean we don't need to focus on this life. Of course, we need to focus on this life and make preparations. And, if we survive, of course, think ahead. But at the same time, in the back of our mind, also remember next life, because, well, as we all know, we don't know what's next, tomorrow or next life. Okay, great. So that's something to think about. And then next time we start with the 9-point death meditation, but just in preparation for that. All right, great. Then we've got some questions. Now, Jimmy asked not to have his question asked, but I want to ask his question. It's really good. It's really important, actually. And even if I took up some time with this question last time, well, I thought it was important. So I don't think you need to worry. The explanation is a little long, so I may not go into it. It's a little difficult to understand. No, I understood later. I read it more carefully, and it is clear, but I don't think we need the examples. But I like this because it's important. This question is very much relates to the question of the importance or the relation between mind and body. What influences what? Okay, so in that context, and with some of you, if you've followed the class on the second chapter of the Pramanavartika, we discussed this in this context. But anyway, it's an important question. So, does attachment to the self have a physiological or intellectual basis? Okay, so if the basis is physical, physical in the sense that we have attachment because there's some physical aspect, there's something physical in us that is responsible for the attachment, then nothing we can do about it. Well, that's the question. But if it is intellectual, then it could be corrected by changing our way of thinking. All right. Okay, so let me just do this. Okay, I want to see all of you. Where's Jimmy? Okay, now I see all of you. Great. All right. So what about attachment? Does it have a physiological basis or a mental basis? And if it had a physical basis, if it was, would be probably part of our brain, could we change it or not? What do you think, Jimmy?
Okay. As I already said, I'm so much in favor of the Chittamatra. I'm really thinking of mind only. So I'm thinking that there's something that represents my body and something that represents my mind. And I think the brain represents my mind. It's a representation because the mind cannot be expressed in any way. So for normal people, that's what. It's just a symbol.
But can we change the brain? Can we change the brain?
Possibly, but yeah, it's just we can change it. Yeah, sure.
Right? This whole research on how meditation affects the brain, it's not that the brain changes the meditation, but the other way around, right? That our mind changes the brain. But even the question, so let's say there's something in our brain that right now we cannot change. Well, maybe in this life we cannot change it, but can we change it in the future? Right? What about, for instance, right now, being born as a human being. Now, I'm not talking about attachment or any of the afflictions, but what our eye consciousness can do right now. It's limited, having a human eye consciousness or having a human brain. So to a certain extent, it can do certain things, but I can't do other things. But can we do something so in the future we're not born with such a human brain?
Yeah, sure. Slowly.
Sure.
Yeah, step by
Right?
step.
We
Sure.
can, right?
Mm.
I'm just working on Geshe Pesang's. He's preparing, well, some of his students are preparing this beautiful book on the Puram, Abhirati.
Mm.
I'm really getting into it again. It's so beautiful. And this time it's very short with illustrations. So you understand Abhirati, you get all the explanations. It's very beautiful. So in that context, wow, if you read about Abhirati, very different body that you'll have in the future. Not that ordinary human being with all its limitations, but quite a different body. Anyway, but the question still remains, what comes first, mind or body? Does our body determine what our mind is thinking, or the other way around? Anyone? What is it? Is it mind over body, body over mind?
Well,
Both
on
are
one
depend.
level,
Yes, B? Go ahead.
on one level, in a very gross level, we are attached to our to sensual pleasure. So we want to be warm. We do not want to be cold. Cold. So that is physically based.
Yes. So this is exactly what, for instance, Dharmakirti says in the Pramanavartika, in the second chapter. He says, yes, our sense perception, when it comes to sense perception, we depend on the body. Okay, so as B was saying, well, the experience of extreme heat or cold, or just not even extreme heat or cold, the way it makes us feel mentally very much depends on the body. That is true. But on the other hand, our mental consciousness can, of course, also affect our body big time, right? I mean, through meditation, our brain can be affected. Our sense perception, well, that would be difficult. I don't think through meditation that suddenly you won't need glasses any longer, or you no longer have the external experience of, let's say, cold or heat and so forth. But your reaction, whether you react to it or not, that's a different matter. Yeah. And so I think anything, even if the afflictions were rooted in something physical, there's changes we can make. I mean, we can make incredible changes to our brain due to neuroplasticity, of course. Neuroplasticity shows us that changes to the brain are possible no matter how old we are. There are always changes. And secondly, if we can't make changes in this life, we can in the future. All right. Okay. Anyway, so I thought just to briefly address this point, I thought it was a good question. Now let me go back to the...
But then at the more subtle level, our mind affects what kind of body we get.
Yes, exactly. That's
another
exactly
whole level of conversation.
Yeah, exactly. That's why in the next life, yeah, exactly as you're saying, in the next life, our mind determines what rebirth we're going to take and what body we'll take. Yes, Shmuel, I'm not sure I was say it correctly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Venerable, can it be that our attachment is affected, is the product of both our mind and our body?
Can you give an example? In what way your body? I mean, I don't disagree, but I want to, yeah.
Well, if I see some like food that I happen to have attachment for, or you know, maybe something more gross like cigarettes. So I think that the attachment for cigarettes also develops with certain circuits in the brain, or some.
Yep.
So
yeah, absolutely.
The attachment
Physical
to cigarettes,
dependence. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah. I mean, with food, it's also interesting because I don't think it's purely mental that some people love hummus and there are possibly people who hate hummus. I mean, I don't know anyone. But the thing is, yeah, there are different foods. Some people prefer, others don't. And I don't think it's purely mental. Yeah, absolutely. And then with the eye consciousness, well, who knows? whether our blues appear differently. I mean, what is my blue is your green and so forth. And because in your case, it appears really brightly, you may be attached to it. And in my case, it looks dull. So I'm not attached to it. Yeah, of course. I mean, our attachment to sense objects definitely depends on the body. Yeah.
So then it would mean that in order to liberate it in this body, we must change the physiological body somehow. I mean, that implies that, I don't know, arhats have very different brains or something like that.
If it depended only on the body, I would agree with you. But it's not just the body. There's a dependence on the body, but it's mainly dependent on the mind.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you agree? I mean, like, even if I'm totally, I mean, I have this blissful experience when it comes to seeing blue or eating hummus or whatever. Wouldn't you agree that you can reduce your attachment to hummus nevertheless? I mean, it still is delicious. It continues to be delicious even when I reduce my attachment to it. Right? So
Yes,
just having
yes.
attachment, so it does depend on it, but it doesn't mean that it's the main trigger. The main trigger is the mental consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Ishima, can I
Yes.
just add, on the physical
Of course.
basis, like
Yes,
when we read research about, addiction treatments,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it is yes, it has become a physical basis for, drugs, alcohol, but even that can be changed,
Mm.
with therapy,
Mhm.
other
That's true.
modalities. So
Yeah.
people can wean off that. I mean,
Mm.
even on carbs, like sometimes you just get, your body just gets addicted to carbs, but then
Mm.
you just change what you're eating and your body stops wanting carbs anymore, sugar anymore. So you can even train your physical basis to respond differently once you decide, okay, I'm going to wean myself off. I'm going to be less dependent on coffee or whatever.
Great. That's a good point. You're right. I think especially if you have an interest in what's good for you, what's healthy for the body, then the moment you hear it's good, it's almost like the taste changes. Versus, if there's something like sweets and so forth. I think it's the power of the mental consciousness that kind of gives a different taste to the sweetness or whatever. Yeah, I agree. So with drugs, even more powerful. Yeah, great. Very good. Okay.
Can I add something to this?
Of course.
Yes.
Of course.
Because I
Yes.
was thinking about food poisoning. When
Uh-huh.
you like the food, that's why you eat it.
Mhm.
And then it was kind of bad or whatever, then you vomit, but it happens instantaneously. You don't want this food anymore for a very long time.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, yeah. You
But
associate that food with that poisoning, with that
you don't have to,
nausea.
just you have total aversion to that food. It has
Yeah,
happened.
it's not even like a thought process. It's like a reflex.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's true.
Not just
Yeah.
non-attachment, you have total aversion. It makes you sick just by thinking about it.
Aren't they drugs that you take, for instance, when someone is an alcoholic? Don't they take a drug that the alcohol makes them so sick?
Yeah.
Is that effective? Is that proven?
Sometimes, but this has to do with, because I've been an alcoholic and I drank, and I had to vomit sometimes, but it didn't have that effect that I didn't want to drink anymore. It took
Right.
a lot of other things to be able to stop.
Okay. All right.
Stop something that makes you, food makes you feel kind of good for a very short time. Alcohol really calms your crazy mind. I mean, it does. And
it has a greater effect on your mind. Yeah.
Kind of peace for a while, but then it doesn't do it anymore. So you need more and more and more. But the effect, that's what it.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I like the one about the food poisoning in particular. That's true. A total kind of switch. Yeah. Great. Thank you. All right, let's go back to the other questions. I think there's only Oritz left. Orit, are you there? Yeah. Okay. So I know you're just making statements here, Orit, but still I think it's interesting. So I don't know so much about this one here. Oh yeah, it is a question. So we spoke about the imprints of the root misconception, of the root ignorance that apprehends inherent existence, so causes all phenomena that an arhat's mind perceives to appear as existing inherently. All right, so the imprints left after the root ignorance or the root misperception has been abandoned, has been eliminated. So what's left is the appearance of inherent existence. Is it like lucid dreaming? When you know you're dreaming, when you know it's just an appearance to your mind. I think that works. Yeah, that's what lucid dreaming means, isn't it? You know that you're dreaming, and you can actually, well, you can control the dream. In that sense, here you can't really control. It's like either it appears or it doesn't, and in this case, it does appear. To the arhat's mind, inherent existence appears. You can't switch it on and off.
That's
Versus,
dream.
yeah, go ahead.
Appearance is like the parallel to the dream. You can't
Okay.
have a lucid dream without a dream. So,
All right. So just remaining in the dream. Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. Yeah, that would work. It would work. That to some degree, it's like, yeah, lucid dreaming. They see it, but they know it's not really there. Okay. So it appears to the mind and they know it's just a dream, or it's just the appearance of inherent existence, has no root in reality. Of course, the dream exists, the inherent existence doesn't exist, but the appearance of the inherent existence, that exists. So the dream is just an appearance, the appearance of inherent existence. Yeah, in that way it works. Is it the reason that they can defy gravity? Is that the reason that they can defy gravity, move through solid objects, and turn the earth to gold and so on? I don't think it's merely knowing that phenomena lack inherent existence, because of course they exist. So it's not saying they don't exist and therefore anything is possible. It is that, but it's also to do with deep states of concentration, when you can focus the mind in a very profound way, very single-pointedly focus on a particular object, and for instance visualize that in a place where there's actually water, well, that there's earth, that there is solid ground. And through the power of concentration, and I don't know how that works. I mean, I'm sure there's a scientific explanation. If you had enough people who had these deep states of concentration, and if they were scientists, they could definitely research it. But without talking about science here, the point is that, yes, I don't know how it works, but it is through these deep levels of concentration that they're able to transform their perception and their reaction of the body. And so that they can walk over water, for instance, or defy gravity in the sense that they can, what's the word? Levitate, move through solid objects, turn the earth to gold, and so forth. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's to do so much with, but it helps to know that phenomena don't exist inherently. All right. The imprints of attachment may drive an arhat to display restless behavior. Okay, so you understand better with examples. That makes perfect sense. So if an arhat as an ordinary being had attachment to pineapple pizza and aversion to mushroom pizza, then when he or she is presented with it, then he or she feels restlessness or says something unkind to the delivery person. Yeah, it would be possible. If in this life, they have this incredible preference for pineapple pizza, or they even have attachment to pizza, pineapple pizza, and then aversion to mushroom pizza, and then they're overcome in this lifetime. So it may just be subtle aversion, subtle attachment that they're left with in this lifetime. They become arhats, yeah, due to the imprints, and even in the next life, if the attachment was so strong, just that tendency is still there. So restlessness or whatever, I mean, yeah, possible. I don't know. I mean, like I said, last time I had talked about it, Lama Tsongkhapa only mentioned it in this one quote that I gave you from Illumination of the Intent, and didn't explain it further. But I guess that would work. Is there a special technique to get rid of them during the post-meditation session or post-meditation time? Well, what is the post-meditation time? Is when you arise from the meditative equipoise, having realized emptiness directly. Now you arise from that and you have the ordinary appearance, even as an arhat. Things just appear inherently existent once again. And so the imprints are at work. Well, it's the imprints that cause, in one case, restlessness, or maybe kind of a harshness towards the delivery person or someone else. So the technique to overcome this is really to overcome the imprints. How do you overcome the imprints? Well, you continue meditating on emptiness, directly realizing emptiness, as you say. And then once you become a Buddha, using the analogy or the metaphor of the jar with the garlic, well, once you've eliminated all obscurations, the subtlest types of imprints or the subtlest types of cognitive obstructions, well, then all the smell is gone. You've become a Buddha and there are no longer any tendencies. Yeah. And then this question, it's not a question, but it's an interesting thought. Okay, so we
talked so much about homage and paying homage. So
okay, all right. Oh, okay. I thought you're talking about meditational insensitivity to pain.
No, you mean the Sipper syndrome? I just listened to you on the bus, and you were talking about this insensitivity to pain. So I just thought if you're interested in it,
okay,
it's
all
not
right.
a question at all. It's just
not a question. Okay.
Summary.
Okay, yeah, this is interesting. So what Orit is saying here, she's talking about the 26th chapter of the Golden Light Sutra, when the Buddha says to Ananda, he shows him some bones in a stupa, and these were the bones of his previous incarnation when he sacrificed his body to a tigress, so for the 5 cups of the tigers, you've all heard the story. In order for these 5 cups to survive, he gave his body. These are the bones, therefore. You pay homage to them, like saying, this is the sacrifice I made. It took me to enlightenment. That was what I needed to accumulate enough virtue. I mean, he already accumulated enough virtue on other occasions, but that was a powerful time when he accumulated a lot of virtue. And so he gave away his body to the 5 tigresses, or the 5 cups, who became later on became his first 5 disciples. And then you talk about congenital insensitivity to pain, which is a genetic disorder. There's no need to go through it, but basically, yeah, so it's a disorder that some people have. I remember reading about it, a British woman in her 50s. She's suffering from this. Yeah, it's interesting. She broke her bones many times without having any pain. So that's the problem. But she also had no problem with childbirth, no pain whatsoever. So here in this case, there is also a certain insensitivity to pain, but it's meditational. Because as you probably all remember from studying the Chandrakirti's entry into the middle way, in the first chapter, Chandrakirti talks about giving away your body. Although the words don't directly imply that you have to realize emptiness directly in order to do so, but it talks about the ability to be able to do this. So, or it's implied that once you realize emptiness directly, then it's relatively easy to give away your body. So this is the verse number 9 of the first chapter. The perfection of will become committed to giving away even his very flesh. Giving becomes a sign to infer his unseen qualities. So if a bodhisattva is able, and here we're talking about a super mundane level of generosity, which means a type of generosity that develops or has developed after you've realized emptiness directly. So that's on the first bhumi, or the first ground. First of all, the bodhisattva is able to engage in great acts of generosity, as giving away his body and external belongings, and it's without the slightest glimmer of the attachment or possessiveness that undermine the perfection of generosity. So it's a special generosity that is only possible once you realize emptiness directly. So here it talks about giving away even your very flesh, and that becomes a sign for us. We can then infer from that, because the qualities, of course, of a bodhisattva on that level, they are unseen to us, but on the basis of being able so effortlessly to give away his body or her body, we can infer that this bodhisattva must have realized emptiness directly. So in the case of the previous, of the example that is given here in the Golden Light Sutra in the 26th chapter, I suppose it doesn't, Buddha doesn't talk about it. It's very short. The 26th chapter is not that long, but it does mention that he gave away his body, and it seemed to have been effortless. And in that sense, you could talk about a meditational insensitivity to pain versus a congenital.
It's two different subjects. I'm sorry that they are one after the other.
They were different. Oh, you didn't mean to.
There is a space.
Oh, I thought they were connected.
It wasn't my point at all. It's just that
okay.
we talked about how do you pay, with what currency do you pay homage, and then the Buddha said, "This is how I repay." But that's it. It's just like a game of words. I didn't mean anything.
Okay. I took it in a totally different direction. Never mind then. Okay. Anyway, thank you for that. So let's go back to the text. Where is it? I'm still struggling with this a little bit. Oh, here we go. No, that's the question. Those are the questions. Let me just look for the text. Oh, here we go. All right, so we're back with the Precious Garland, still with the first chapter, with the first verse even. And so what we've learned is that Nāgārjuna paid homage, well, it's basically just a term, right? Bows to the Buddha by, of course, explaining his qualities. So for us to know, well, that's what I'm aiming for, that's what I'm aspiring to. First of all, qualities that mainly benefit the Buddha, in the sense that we're not aware of these qualities. They indirectly, of course, benefit us, but having the mind of a Buddha, here this mainly refers to the mind of a Buddha, mind of the Buddha free from all the obscurations. So it's really like one aspect here, one aspect. So this Buddha's mind, perfect realization, the omniscient mind that is free from any obscurations. Well, the Buddha experiences, of course, his own mind, and we benefit from the enlightened activities. But the way it is described is that first you have to overcome what's extra, what's not part of your mind, what hinders us, what limits us, which are the obscurations, afflictive ones. So afflictive obscuration, I was thinking about the Tibetan word. Yeah, so it's like these states of mind that just as a disease afflicts us and manifests in certain symptoms, likewise, our delusions, anger, aversion, and so forth, they afflict us in the sense that they manifest symptoms such as acting in an extreme way, controlled by the afflictions, leading to karma, leading to karmic actions, and of course suffering. So those then are eliminated, the afflictive obscurations, likewise the cognitive ones. When the afflictive ones have been overcome, then the cognitive ones are overcome. Once all of this is gone, when all the afflictions are gone, all the obscurations are gone, then the mind can do what it does best. The actual nature of the mind can manifest to know everything. But not just that, now love and compassion, which we all have to a certain degree, they can manifest to their fullest, which then leads to the enlightened activities. All right. So that's what we discussed as part of the first verse. Now, the second verse is the promise to compose the text. I'll give a footnote. I haven't gotten that far yet in the preparation. Actually, in Tibetan here, these two words, where's the Tibetan here? That's in the Tibetan, it's in the first line. In this in the English, it comes just because grammatically it makes sense. It comes in the next line. So you see the Tibetan word is the same, even if you don't read Tibetan. I mean, just the way it's written. This one here, well, it's slightly different. It's a transitive versus an intransitive verb. But other than that, it's got the same meaning. And in some translations, it's translated the same, accomplish, accomplish. But since I now have also the Sanskrit version, and I don't know anything, I don't know any Sanskrit, just a few words. But in that version, the Sanskrit is written in English phonetics, and with, well, Google Translate and so forth, you can use these programs. It's become quite straightforward to go through a Sanskrit text. And I noticed that although in Tibetan the word is the same, in Sanskrit it isn't, which is why it makes sense to translate it differently. Also in the translation by John Donne, it's a different word. So anyway, it's not a big deal, but I changed it according to John Donne's translation. John Donne uses a slightly different word. I didn't want to move away too far from the Tibetan. So anyway, therefore, O king, I will explain to you the fully virtuous Dharma so that you may give rise to the Dharma within yourself. Those two lines are the promise to compose the text. And then the last two lines, they give the reason for teaching the king, who's the main person here, the main object, why he's taught the verses of the Precious Garland, indicating that the king is a suitable vessel for the Dharma and will thus attain realizations. And in that context, what does it mean to be a vessel for the Dharma? There are certain qualities, and they're usually just mentioned. They're mentioned in the 400 verses by Ayadeva, for instance, but there's not a lot of explanation. So I explained a little bit. I gave a little bit of explanation based on what I learned. But anyway, that comes a little later. So the first two lines, the promise to compose the text. And we've heard about this, well, a lot of times, I guess. I mean, a lot of Tibetan texts, a lot of Indian texts. The words of homage are followed by the promise. So Buddhist treatises typically include a promise to compose the text. Sometimes it's explicit, sometimes implicit. And it's not a mere formality. It may seem that it's just a style and you have to make a promise, but no, it's not a mere formality. There's a certain structure to it, but there's also a specific reason. This promise, it acts as a powerful tool, and that's usually the main reason given for initiating, guiding, and ensuring the successful completion of the composition. So initiating the completion, I mean, initiating the actual composition, guiding it, and of course, ensuring the successful completion. So if you've given a promise and you really want to keep it, it makes sense that in that sense, well, for the author, that they'll continue, they don't just start a few verses and then put it aside, but actually complete this particular text. It also fosters purpose and motivation for the author. So for Nāgārjuna, it motivates him. There's a certain purpose and a motivation, and it establishes a connection with the reader, with us. I mean, who's the promise directed at? It's directed at us. So there's this connection with the reader. Previously, Nāgārjuna talked about the Buddha, praised the Buddha, and so forth for our benefit, yes, but the promise is directed at us. So this connection is made with the reader, with us. And it's not just the king is the main object, but as later on it becomes also clear in the text, Nāgārjuna talks to also other philosophers, and he talks to us. I mean, obviously, also speaks to us. Anyway, so it establishes a connection with the reader while emphasizing the importance of intention and commitment in creating Buddhist literature. So intention, I want to do this, and the commitment that goes along with that. The promise also highlights, and here it's taking a little bit, this is not the usual explanation, but it's kind of implied by that. So the promise also highlights the pivotal role the important role a qualified author plays in the transmission of the Dharma. Now, I'm not saying just because there's a promise to compose a text, some non-qualified author is composing a text and they put a promise there, so all this applies to them. No, I'm talking about a qualified author. So it just, again, puts the author kind of puts it as the author becomes like the center of our attention, in particular here with regard to the importance of transmitting of teaching the Dharma. So not only does it demonstrate his deep commitment here in the case of Nāgārjuna, this deep commitment to finish, which is so much harder, of course, at the time of Nāgārjuna, when writing tools were not readily available. I mean, paper was scarce, probably not easy to get by. Whatever you wrote on, there was great effort. It required a great effort. It was great difficulty. A great difficulty was associated with writing something. And so to not finish it would have not been a great surprise. But instead of leaving it at some point, no, these 500 verses, he got all the way to the end. So it demonstrates his deep commitment to upholding and sharing the teachings of the Buddha. It also acknowledges the weight of the task. So why to make a promise? Well, a promise needs to be made because it's so important. So the importance of preserving the accuracy and integrity of the teachings being transmitted. And of course, with this promise, the author actively participates in the lineage of Dharma transmission, becoming a link in the chain of great masters who have dedicated themselves to preserving and spreading the teachings, thereby upholding the Buddha's intention to benefit all sentient beings. All right, so maybe, yeah, it's in a way, it's all included in that. It's not what is usually literally set in the explanations. Usually it's just saying, for the successful completion of the composition. But all that also plays a part, I guess. And again, to appreciate the importance of the author, the commitment, the intention. Yeah, so in that way, I thought it was important to emphasize that. And then this is something that's also mentioned when we study Parchen. Last time I said that many of the aspects I'm going to emphasize here as part of studying the Precious Garland, I also emphasized when we study Parchen, when we study the Perfectional Wisdom Sutras, especially based on Maitreya's Abhisamaya Alamkara, or Ornament for Clear Realizations. So in our commentaries, for instance, this verse here is given, again, in the context of talking about the promise to compose the text, but this time, of course, or as part of Parchen, not of composing the Precious Garland, but composing the Ornament for Clear Realizations. Anyway, so many teachers, when commenting on a Buddhist treatise, quote the following verse from Nāgārjuna's Tree of Wisdom. That's a beautiful text, actually, called Tree of Wisdom. It has been translated into English. It's an older translation. I think it was translated probably like 70, 80 years ago, but you'll find a copy on Amazon, but you also find it online because I searched for it. So Tree of Wisdom, it's just this short text which gives beautiful advice by Nāgārjuna. So in this text, he gives this one quote. So to elucidate the significance of the promise to compose the text found at the beginning of such a work, usually the commentators give this particular verse. So you may have heard of it before. Now I've retranslated this. I thought the translation wasn't exactly what I understood, so I kind of adjusted the translation a little bit from the text that I just mentioned. Anyway, so the verse reads, "The wise do not give many promises, but the promises they make, though difficult to keep, are like carvings in stone, unchanging even in the face of death." It's a beautiful verse. So don't lightly make a promise. It's not just about the promise to compose a text in general. It's about not making promises lightly, and especially when they're difficult to keep, to really try and keep them as a general advice. But here in this context, it talks about this promise, or it's mentioned in this context, in the context of making a promise to compose the text, and not just compose it, but complete it, of course. Well, those are the same. So this quote underscores the deep commitment and sincerity behind such promises, emphasizing their enduring nature and the serious dedication required for composing a Buddhist treatise. All right, so this is a lot on just the promise to compose the text, but I thought, again, it's important when we read these texts, not just to go through them quickly without giving it much thought, but to understand there are particular reasons for making these promises, and to take time, to take the time with it, just take a moment to appreciate Nāgārjuna in this context. But these first two lines, not only do they describe the promise to compose the text, because in his commentary on the Precious Garland, Geshe, so that's the main commentary I use. So in this commentary on the Precious Garland, Geshe indicates that the lines that constitute the promise to compose the Precious Garland also present what are called the words of purpose and relationship. I don't know, are you familiar with these words of purpose and relationship? Let me just look. Is anyone familiar with this? Have you heard of these words of, I don't know whether they're maybe translated differently. Sometimes
ultimate purpose.
Pardon?
And
yeah,
ultimate
exactly.
purpose and immediate purpose.
Yeah.
And how
they're connected.
How the text achieves.
Yeah, so the subject matter, the immediate purpose, the ultimate purpose, and how those are connected. How do you refer to them usually? Shanti, do you know?
I don't know, but they say immediate purpose and ultimate purpose. I forget the relationship. Yeah,
exactly. Just a sec. I go back to sharing the text. Right. Okay. So in Tibetan, it's like gudaginga, gudenga. Sometimes I've seen it translated as purposeful. No, what is it? Connected purpose. But actually, I don't think that's what it means. I think it's really like words. Nga means words or speech of purpose and relationship. So, okay. Anyway, in the first two lines, going back to the very beginning, and once we explain these two lines, it becomes apparent how these four are connected. How they are somehow, somewhat part of these two lines. It's not exactly apparent. Anyway, so I will explain to you the fully virtuous Dharma so that you may give rise to the Dharma within yourself. For instance, this Dharma in the first line and the second line, not the same. But that becomes obvious, or that becomes clear from the commentaries. Anyway, talking about these four aspects, words of purpose and relationship, why are they mentioned? Well, they're mentioned because it helps us to understand how the whole text is connected. First of all, understanding what is Nāgārjuna talking about? What is the main topic? What is its purpose? What's the ultimate purpose? And how it's all connected. So in a way, it's like looking at these puzzle pieces. We're going to go into each puzzle piece and look at them and try to understand them. But right from the beginning, it's almost like the puzzle is already complete and you see the whole. You see the whole and get a sense, this is what this is all for. This is the main subject matter. And once you understand that, you have that in the back of your mind, it's so much easier to then understand all the details, because you can always bring them back to those four, in particular, first three. All right. So Indian Buddhist treatises often begin, and that's not limited to Indian Buddhist treatises. There are also other treatises, but here we're talking specifically about the Precious Garland, which is an Indian Buddhist treatise. Treatise is Denshu in Tibetan. So usually there are two words when you refer to any kind of text by an Indian master. Indian Buddhist master, I should stress, an Indian Buddhist master. Now, these are divided into two types. The texts that come from an Indian Buddhist master, who was the Buddha, and then of an Indian Buddhist master who was not the Buddha, was not Buddha Shakyamuni. So it's ka means the words of the Buddha, and then everything else is a treatise by an Indian master. So ka denshu, those two. Ka, or Buddha's words, Buddha's speech or Buddha's words. Those include all the sutric teachings and even the tantric teachings, anything the Buddha has taught. And then following from the Buddha, all the disciples of the Buddha, the great Indian masters, starting with Nāgārjuna and Ayadeva and so forth, well, their texts are called treatises. Now, they're not really the written word. They're said to be the words themselves. I mean, the speech, the sound themselves, and they have just been written down. But often they're used interchangeably, because sometimes when you talk about a treatise, you may also refer to the written word itself. But strictly speaking, it refers to the words, the words an Indian master has spoken. So in the Indian Buddhist treatises here, the Buddhist masters who came after the Buddha, they often begin with the words of purpose and relationship, which outline 4 components. Subject matter. So what's the main subject? That's good to know. What's the text all about? Its immediate purpose. So what's the immediate, what should we do? What should we do with it? It's basically telling us, what should we do with it? And then the ultimate purpose. Well, in the long term, what should we do with it in the long term? And how the first 3 components relate to each other. This structure helps us to understand, well, first of all, why the author composed the treatise. What's the whole point? It gives us a sense of what it's all about. Why did Nāgārjuna do this? What we should supposed to do with it. It helps to provide context, clarifies the text intent and significance, and it provides, and that's most important, a comprehensive framework for understanding the teaching and its relevance to both daily life and the ultimate goals of liberation and enlightenment. So in the sense that, how is this relevant to me right now? What can I do with it right now? And how is it relevant to me in the long term, in terms of the goals of liberation and enlightenment? And even though we don't have a strong sense of what liberation and enlightenment is, but that's why we learn about it. We get a better sense every time we listen to the Dharma, every time we read a Dharma text and so forth. Well, we get a better sense of what these goals are. But at the same time, it's of course important, how is this relevant to us here? This is very much stressed with the immediate purpose. It's not just all for, well, attaining enlightenment, yes, of course, but also what is relevant? How is it relevant to us right now? And some of the explanations given here, they are the immediate, well, they're the explicit immediate purpose, but of course there's other ways in which we can get a sense of the purpose for us individually. Anyway, so the subject matter here just in general encompasses the primary topic or core teaching that is covered in the treatise and provides the context for the subsequent discussion. Yeah, right. That's, I guess, pretty obvious, but just to stress it again. So this is not saying the Precious Garland subject matter, it's just saying subject matter in general. The immediate purpose relates the specific aim or objective of a text within its immediate context. So not in the long term, but in the immediate context. What is the specific aim or objective, the goal of this text? It clarifies why the subject matter is being presented and what the author intends for the reader to accomplish in the short term by studying and reflecting on the treatise. Yeah, it's not difficult to understand. The ultimate purpose points to the ultimate or long-term goal that a text is designed to achieve. It looks beyond the immediate objectives and focuses on the broader, enduring, and most important result of the teaching, the reader's attainment of liberation and enlightenment. Of course, that's always the main goal, liberation and enlightenment. But in the short term, of course, there are other goals as well. And the relationship denotes the connection between the subject matter, immediate purpose, and long-term purpose, and indicates how those three contribute meaningfully to the first two, the subject matter and the immediate purpose, how they contribute meaningfully to the ultimate purpose. So how these two are most important. How are they important, these first two? And what is the connection? The connection is always the same. The connection between the three is that the ultimate purpose relates to and is dependent on the immediate purpose, and the immediate purpose depends on the subject matter. So the third component depends on the second component on the first, which makes sense. I mean, we can't get to liberation and enlightenment, we can't reach or attain liberation and enlightenment without, in the meantime, fulfilling a particular immediate purpose. And that, of course, is only possible if there's certain concepts. So in this case, the subject matter of the Precious Garland, that helps us to then practice as an intermediate or in the short term, to then in the long term attain liberation and enlightenment. Okay. Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned. Am I too wordy? Am I giving too much explanation? But anyway, you can just skip it. It's not that difficult. But yeah, anyway. But here, most important is now, what is the subject matter? What is the Precious Garland all about? What is its immediate purpose and so forth? Subject matter. So actually, the Precious Garland explores two aspects of the Dharma. It investigates, it explores, it expounds or explains two aspects of the Dharma in its subject matter, a causal and a resultant. Okay, so first the resultant. So it's got two aspects. So when we talk about the Dharma, when it says Dharma in the lines of the promise to compose the text, those two lines, there's a causal Dharma and a resultant Dharma. What is the result? Well, resultant aspect encompasses the two key objectives of Buddhist practice: higher rebirth. So higher rebirth means rebirth in the human or celestial realm. Maybe I'll mention this later, but please don't misunderstand. Just because we say human existence is the best, we're not saying as a celestial being you cannot practice. And in particular, talking about the pure realms. And I'm going back to Geshe after reading this beautiful explanations he's given. He's done a lot of research on this particular pure realm, Abhirati, where just ordinary beings can be reborn like us, and will find great conditions, very conducive condition for Dharma practice. And by definition, that is a celestial realm. It's a pure land or a pure realm, pure land. Which doesn't mean it cannot be celestial. I mean, it's still celestial. It's not part of the desire realm as such. No, it's not part of the desire realm, I don't think. And it's a celestial realm. But even the desire realm, like a celestial desire realm, can still be conducive for Dharma practice. So it's not saying that it's an absolute no-go, like no way once you become a celestial being, you cannot practice. But then I have a question to all of you. If that is true, why should we rejoice that we're not reborn in the long term, like as a long life God? It seems to be a contradiction, right? When we reflect on, for instance, the different opportunities, the different leisures and opportunities as part of the precious human life, well, we have the leisure of being free from being born as a long life, what do you call it? Long life deity. So isn't that contradictory if on the other hand we should be reborn in one of those, well, either a human or celestial realm? What do you think? Anyone?
Well, like everything, it depends. Also, human being. I mean, if you know that you can be born in this specific celestial realm and it's better than being born human, then yeah, by all means, go there. If not,
by all means.
But from what I read, most of the celestial realm are not conducive for Dharma practice. You just list out all day.
You just so you cannot practice the Dharma in the ordinary celestial realm. So let's leave aside the Pure Land, right? In the ordinary celestial realm, you cannot.
Well, I don't know. There are many levels. So I think at the 33 you can, maybe the Tushita heaven also, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Shmuel. You raised your hand, yeah, Shmuel.
Yeah, so I would say that if we can practice, but it's harder there, then we should be aspired to be free from that, even though it might be possible to do some practice as an animal, like an animal who saves another animal, but from being hit, or a mother who cares for her pets, for her babies, like a cow mother, but it's much harder in general to do practice as an animal. So it's still better to be free from that.
Okay, so Shmuel, you're actually saying higher rebirth can also include the animal realm. Like here we say higher rebirth, right? That's the subject matter, one of the subject matters of the Precious Garland, which is basically saying we should work towards being born as a human being or a celestial being. It doesn't talk about the animal realm, right?
Yes, I agree. It was just an analogy for a situation in which it is possible to practice, but we nevertheless aspire to not to be reborn in such a situation, because it's harder to be practiced in such a situation.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder about the animal realm. Is it harder or is it impossible, right? As a dog or cat, but we don't know. I mean, we really don't know. It's probably less likely. I mean, they have, of course, the Nagas, which are said to be very intelligent. So animals, but again, this is just from a Buddhist point of view, and we need to investigate this. We need to analyze this. But are animals in general not able to transform their mind? I mean, in general, it doesn't seem, when we look around animals, they can be very compassionate and very kind, but thinking ahead and transforming their mind, well, I guess actually impossible. But then let's focus on the human and the celestial realm. You know, with the celestial realm that Geshe talks about a lot, why would you want to be reborn there and not born in the human realm? I mean, it's still a precious human rebirth means a human rebirth. Why would you want to be reborn in Abhirati? It's Akshobhya's pure realm, associated with the Buddha Akshobhya. So what is so special about Abhirati, or this, what is it called? The realm of manifest joy.
Well, I guess you just have to read the description and you know why you want to be reborn there, because you'll be in contact with the Buddhist teachings all the time, and you don't have a body that needs kind of sustenance like ours and this and that. And also I don't think you're being born there just by coincidence. It's like you make aspirations to be reborn there.
Yeah, a lot of aspirations. Not easy. It's definitely not easy. But why then the precious human? Why is the precious human rebirth? What is so much greater about the precious human rebirth versus rebirth in the pure realm? Why so much emphasis on that?
Because you have some suffering, but you're not totally overwhelmed by the suffering. In the Pure Land, there's no suffering. That's why they say, I think that's why they say human is the best, because you can understand suffering because there is suffering, but you can also understand pleasure because there is pleasure, something like that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. There's something Geshe Thupten very much emphasizes in terms of Abhirati, but I'll get to that. Shanti, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I think also if you have everything, then how can you practice not stealing, avoiding the non-virtues, because you have everything. So it's difficult to practice certain kinds of morality, control your emotions, afflictions.
Right. Okay, so it should be easier. Yeah, I mean, in a way, it is. The thing that Geshe Pesang always says, and I don't know, I'm just repeating what he says. A bodhisattva would want to be reborn as a human being. A bodhisattva would want to be born as a human being because it's faster. Because exactly as Venerable Lobsang said, well, there's more suffering, there are more obstacles, there are more problems. So on one hand, of course, suffering is better for renunciation and so forth, but also overcoming these obstacles. That's why, of course, it is said that practicing at these degenerate times when it's so much harder, no Buddha around, right? No Buddha Shakyamuni around any longer, not so many arhats and so forth. I mean, it's just so much harder. It's a lot more rewarding if we really practice. If we really practice, as long as we really do, great. But Geshe Pesang, he's saying, once you're born in Abhirati, there's no way other than practice you won't do anything else. I mean, there are no human distractions. So he very much emphasizes for us beginners, it makes perfectly sense to go to a pure realm. Once you're a bodhisattva, human realm is totally okay. So when I attended his teachings, I remember a lot of discussions on this because Geshe-la, and he's truly amazing. He's so amazing. I need to say this again. I just had a short meeting, a short audience with Geshe Dorje Damdul. And when he talks about Geshe Tupten Pesang, he's like, wow, he's something else. Geshe Tupten Pesang is something else. So I don't know, some of you may be familiar with him, and he truly is. I mean, his teachings are incredible. But the point is that he's done a lot of research on this, and he says, yes, His Holiness the Dalai Lama would never talk about being reborn in the pure realm, or he hasn't really talked about it, because of course, from his perspective, the fastest for the benefit of all sentient beings is being born in the human realm. But are we certain when we're reborn in the human realm, we continue practicing the Dharma? I don't know, right? I hope so, but it's difficult. There's so many distractions and we don't know what the future brings. Anyway, but yes, so it's true that the pure realm, at least according to the descriptions, give you all the, what is it called? You have all the conducive conditions there to practice the Dharma, but it takes longer to get to enlightenment. All right. Okay. Anyway, that should be enough. What's the time now? Oh yeah, oof. All right, great. I guess we could leave it at that today. So we'll have time for a short meditation. Just quickly to summarize what we briefly discussed today, what we went through. Well, we spoke about...
Sorry, can you stop the sharing, please?
Oh, okay, sure. Oh, yeah. Okay. So what we spoke about today, I briefly summarized the verse of homage, these three qualities of the Buddha that Nāgārjuna mentions. And then we continued with the verse of promise to compose the text. Again, the first two lines, literally citing the promise to compose the text, and then the last two lines, with the last two lines of the second verse, Nāgārjuna indicates why he taught this text to the king, and of course, why he also taught to other beings, not just the king, but yeah, mainly the king. He gives the reason, what does it mean to be a real vessel of the Dharma? And as to the promise, we've heard that someone like Nāgārjuna doesn't make promises lightly. This promise shows, it indicates the significance of the commitment, of the intention when composing such a text. So just to stress again the incredible role of the author as a qualified master and so forth. But not just do these two lines indicate, the first two lines of the second verse indicate the promise, but they also talk about, or they also give the words, or they're also described as the words of the purpose and the relationship. which basically means that these two lines set forth the subject matter. They indicate, although it's not directly obvious or immediately obvious with the wording, but they indicate the subject matter, the immediate purpose, the ultimate purpose, and the relationship between them. And as we've heard, the immediate, the subject matter is the two goals. Well, again, it can be divided into the resultant subject matter. So the Dharma, the aspect of the Dharma from the point of view of being a result and from a point of view of being a cause. And here the result is twofold, called higher rebirth. So being reborn in places such as, well, in realms such as the human realm or the celestial realm, or, and we haven't gone through that, but the second being liberation and enlightenment. So the actual goals of Buddhist practice. All right. And then we had a short discussion, well, human existence versus being reborn in the celestial realm. Is it conducive to Dharma practice or not? And of course, in that context, also the celestial existence or the celestial realm of the Pure Land or the Pure Land celestial existence. All right. Okay. That should be enough for today. And then, well, let's do a short meditation. Okay, we start again. Some breathing meditation. Just focusing on the breath. So let's take a moment to focus on Nāgārjuna's promise to compose the text. Giving us the opportunity to connect once again to the author. Appreciating his commitment to composing this text. In order to transmit the precious teachings of the Buddha. Which of course we wouldn't fully understand if we didn't have the different treatises and commentaries. And if we remember or become aware of how difficult it was to write a text, the time of Nāgārjuna. We can even more appreciate even more the fact that he completed the Precious Garland. Completing these 500 verses. Just as he promised at the beginning. But not only does the second verse contain the promise, it also contains the words of purpose and relationship. Which help us to understand why Nāgārjuna composed this text. It provides us with a framework for understanding the teaching and the relevance of the teaching, both right now and in terms of goals of liberation and enlightenment. So the second verse basically indicates 4 components of the Precious Garland. It indicates the subject matter, the immediate purpose or short-term purpose, of the text, the ultimate purpose, and how subject matter, immediate purpose, and ultimate purpose are connected. And so we know at least that the subject matter of the Precious Garland includes the result of higher rebirth. Teaching us how we ourselves can create the causes and conditions to be reborn again in the human realm, or in a celestial realm, to be able to continue our practice of the Buddha Dharma. And now to conclude this short analysis, whatever conclusion you've come to, whatever insight you've gained, spend a few moments single-pointedly focusing on that. And then let's dedicate whatever positive potential we've accumulated today. May it become a cause for us to remove all the obscurations in order to attain perfect realizations and perfect enlightened activities as a fully enlightened Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. And in order to reach such a state, may whatever virtue we accumulated cause our great masters like His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all other living lamas who are still around, to have long and healthy lives. And may all our virtue inspire others caught up in the materialistic world, materialistic modern life, to create the causes for higher rebirth themselves. So with this in mind, let's recite the prayers. Through the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chenrezig, Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. Oh, and then someone mentioned, to dedicate for Jeffrey Hopkins. who's been so kind to us with all his books, all the translations he did. Yeah, so may he have a very good rebirth in the higher rebirth, and continue to be of benefit to us and so many others. All right, thank you, and see you next week.
Thank you, Geshe.
Thank you, Geshe. Good night.
All right, thank you. Good
Thank
night.
you, DFI.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you all.